I want to talk about the transcendent brain, the transcendent form of consciousness that connects the individual ego with the larger probability field. And in particular, in the breathing, in and out between the individual human consciousness and the larger collective consciousness, there are so many different doorways through which this experience is explored. And I think the gift of a tradition, the gift of a belief system, is that it takes this infinite probability field and processes it through the refraction of a given belief system, of a given structure of consciousness. And while these beliefs, while these particular expectations and conceptions modulate the energy, much like if you imagine a color wheel being turned into different rainbow colors based on how a gem is faceted. The structure that we use to process that interaction is shaped by those individual beliefs, which are in turn shaped by the larger cultural beliefs. And if we imagine a sphere being processed through a specific system, a specific religion, a specific culture, the imperfections of the system or the culture will create pockets of friction. And in these pockets of friction, there's an opportunity to awaken, much like a light or electricity moving through a system. Meets a friction point in the form of an incandescent light bulb or an LED light bulb. And in that friction, there is an illumination of what is there. In a certain way, we become conscious of energy, of the breath of energy between the human ego and the larger consciousness through the imperfections in our system. It's a little bit perverse in the sense that if the system is perfect, it is unconscious, because language is itself a system of consciousness. And we're more conscious of the water that bubbles out of a pot than the water that is carefully contained. In that sense, it is the imperfections that lead to human consciousness, whereas it is the perfections that lead to unconsciousness. We can look at the body and energy flowing through the body. And when we are perfectly healthy, perfectly in flow, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, I believe, is an approximation of the name of the author of the book Flow, talks about how people are at their happiest, their most joy-filled, when they are completely immersed in an activity, in flow. This is the point of greatest satisfaction, to be lost in an activity, that we're doing so well, that we transcend the bounds of human ego and become part of something greater when we have that sense of flow. And yet it is the wrestling with the imperfection of the system that leads to the greatest awareness and leads to an ongoing evolution as we become aware of these little illumination points, as the straight line angles through the system of language, through the system of paradigms, through the system of beliefs. We start rounding the corners. To create more flow, which at its best leads to a heightened sense of sensitivity, at which now this more complex system, moving in a spherical direction, still has imperfections. Because by definition, the kind of consciousness that is about language is the kind of consciousness that has angles, that has distinctions. The spherical consciousness has an infinite number of distinctions, and so is completely unconscious. And so, in a certain way, as we come into an ego, as we come into an individuality, we start off with very crude distinctions of good and bad, pain and pleasure. And then we develop a new distinction of the pain that leads to well-being, the pain after a good workout that leads to growth, that leads to muscle development, that leads to pleasure, and the other kind of pain that leads deeper and deeper into dissociation, the kind of pain that leads nowhere, that breaks down complexity. And the goodness, the sugar that breaks down the body, versus the goodness that helps to build the body. And so we develop the good and bad into different kinds of good and bad, different kinds of pleasure and pain, the pleasure of going into debt versus the pleasure of planting a crop that will grow and produce fruits later on. In this way, we continue to divide a little bit of alcohol in a social setting is okay. Too much alcohol, not. A little bit of fun and eroticism is okay, but not too much. We start to develop the sense of context. And then at some point, that context needs to expand as new facets, as we start to explore new facets of the psyche, new facets within. As initially joy is good and anger is bad, and then we move into the distinction where anger expressed in a way to hold certain boundaries is good, anger expressed in a way to destroy certain boundaries is bad in the context of an overall culture. And then we look at the fact that certain cultures are good and then certain cultures are bad in a certain context, and start to soften the edges, the dictatorial extremes. All abortions are good. All abortions are bad within a certain religious framework, within a certain cultural context. And it's a continual process of developing more and more complex and symmetrical systems, which in turn must be challenged and developed. And the purpose of a system is to cage us to the point where in the engagement with the resistance, it leads to consciousness. And the purpose of consciousness is to define and discover the points within the system that created the consciousness that no longer serve the growth within the consciousness. The training wheels, which initially help us to get up on the bicycle, become the training wheels that stop us doing certain stunts. The speed limits that keep us safe within certain frameworks become the speed limits that limit certain expressions, certain needs that transcend the speed limit, getting to a hospital on time, experiencing a certain freedom. And so it is this constant dance with the systems that we create to elicit the friction needed to bring consciousness, which then illuminates the flaw, the simplicity within the system that gave rise to the consciousness that is examining the system. It's in this context that I'm listening to, I think it's Lorna, so an author who's written a book called Angels in My Hair. It just looks like an Irish woman who's had an awareness of angels. And you could have a sense that she's got an uncommon awareness of energy that's part of the larger spherical whole. And in grappling with the paradigm through which to digest and process that energy, she's turning to traditions, the biblical traditions. So the angels that she references are angels referenced within the Bible. And any religious tradition has a rich tapestry of mythology and distinctions through which to digest the larger energy, the transcendent energy of the individual and of the culture reaching outward into the probability field. And it's very lovely. It's a very lovely set of distinctions to be able to have, a good dozen different types of consciousness or presence that's cloaking itself within the meanings and the names with which an individual can relate to it. It's a rememberable system through which to engage with the other. In this sense, our mythologies, our rituals, our projected deities, our various cosmologies, be it astrological signs, zodiacal signs, different planets, what they're all doing for the people who are using them is providing resting points, certain destinations that in some ways are arbitrary. I mean, why these systems rather than this system over here? Why this system rather than this system? Why a system of 48 rather than a system of 12? Why a system of 36 rather than a system of 3,000? What we're dealing with is the amount of consciousness that we can have a felt relationship with. But the key is the energy, which is the presence, the femininity, is within this polarity. You have, scholars that can debate at great lengths whether or not this or that historical fact occurred, whether or not, Jesus was of olive skin and curly hair or blonde and white skin. These types of facts can be debated mentally at great length. But the meaning, the dimensionality, the density of the experience comes from something that we can viscerally relate to. And here we come into the psychedelic experience, where someone like Terence McKenna, a socialist scientific atheist, can, through the DMT experience, move outside of a particular system and thus challenge the system. And so the process is one of coming unconsciously in from complexity into a particular system capable of creating integrated awareness, where we can say, this is a finger, I feel the finger, I smell the finger, I hear the finger. And you can start with a materialistic framework. But if you keep playing with any system, the materialistic system, if you keep exploring the atom, if you keep exploring the laws of physics, if you keep exploring the consciousness that is perceiving the materialistic science, if you go into the depth of materialism, what emerges is an awesome complexity, is an awesome beauty. Because you can go into the world of an ant. You can, as Jane Goodall did with the chimpanzees, you can go into the world of the chimps. And after 50 years of studying chimpanzees, have certain transcendent experiences where first, if you watch the Jane Goodall documentaries, you see her exploring the art of mothering, learning how to mother from a chimp, learning how to, in the case of Jane's first son, learning what it's like to be lonely, in the case of a young chimp that dies shortly after the parent dies, because there isn't the familiar bond. But then moving from the beautiful side, as we would define beauty, into the shadow side, as we would define violence, as the chimpanzee tribe splits, and then the dominant tribe kills the other tribe, thus looking into the nature of violence, of violation, of war, of what the role is, as we look at more complex cosmologies where we have Kali, a goddess of destruction, and also rebirth. And these are all windows. These are all fields of complexity that energy develops the habit of flowing into. And so as you enter the box and then get to know the simplicity of that box intimately, what always happens is the box expands. First, there's the perfect parenting box and the idealistic relationship with the chimps. Then there's the shadow side, and suddenly the box is twice as big. As you enter the emotional box and decide that these feelings are good, and then eventually move through the entire emotional wheel, where you have every feeling in the rainbow, where the dark colors of a Rembrandt illuminate the light colors. And then we have this aspect of complexity, which comes in with perspective, where there are certain things that are horrifying to experience as an individual, but looking from perspective as the species are necessary. And so we have the distinction of what is horrifying to experience up close and personally, but which is beautiful to experience collectively, where you can say that the human experience is richer because of grief. Standing back and looking at grief as part of the color wheel of the human experience, whereas having a soulmate die is a horror, is an evil so thick that it threatens the life of the ego itself, while regenerating the whole. And so you have this tension between that which is beautiful at a distance and that which is tragic personally. The distance between an object determining whether it is tragic or comic. All humor, it has been said, is suffering when it's looking at a distance at other people's suffering. The women who are bored or find it funny that another woman has been cheated on, but find it horrifying to be cheated on oneself. The joke about the cripple that is hilarious in an abstraction, but horrific at an individual personal level. We see a growing sense of complexity in which time, in which dosage, in which distinction, and in which symmetry. That to go through an entire life without ever having one's heart broken is a life less rich with the fruits of sorrow, the fact that every state produces a fruit that requires a certain perspective to appreciate. And so I think one of the things that or one way of looking at and processing, this particular metaphor of the relationship with possibility and actuality between the individual and the collective ecology of which we're all a part, is that we need to enter a system which is cursed with pain and incompetence and corruption and friction, and then work within that system to gradually break down the edges of the system and return to the place where we began before we entered the system. You can look at any couple relationship. You can look at any person. And you can say, oh, that's a mess. Why on earth would I want to enter a relationship with this imperfect individual? It's more trouble than it's worth. Because we can see the imperfections in body, the imperfections in thought, the imperfection in lifestyle, the imperfections in health, the imperfections in money that are part of entering that system. So I don't need a relationship. And yet the beauty that we experience, the transcendence that we experience, comes not from abstaining. Why would I want to get a job? This job has a crappy boss. The money system, it's crap. Bits of paper, corruption over here, made up by the Federal Reserve, controlled by the government. It's shit. Why would I want anything to do with the money system? Why would I want to work in one of these humdrum, boring jobs? I want nothing to do with that. Why would I want to get married? And why would I want to really occupy my individual position as, as soon as I say a thought, I know it's wrong. It's too simple. It doesn't go into enough detail. Or vote. What on earth would I want to vote for one of these idiots for? This person has lies in this area, this person has lies in this area. What's the point? Why would I want to be born? Why would I want to start a video game? It's not fast enough, you get little dots in your eyes, the joysticks aren't built quite perfectly. It would have been so much better if the game had been designed this way rather than this way. Why read a book? It's so tedious. I mean, couldn't they do a virtual reality version? And yet, the person that we become, allowing ourselves to be inducted into a system, into a relationship, into a country. I mean, what a crappy country. These people always get ahead. They shouldn't be getting ahead. These people, like these really kind people over here, they never get any position. It's like, what a crappy country. The whole thing, if you can look clearly, is abhorrent to the part of us that remembers, that knows at some level, but cannot articulate. It's much like language. Why learn language? It's so crude. You never really know what the other person is feeling. They say joy, but what they mean by joy is completely different than what you say by joy. I mean, why even bother talking? It's so pointless to participate in something as insane, as crude, as unsatisfying as language, when there is the infinite knowing. And yet, as human beings, in the imperfect system of the body, in the imperfect system of the country in which we are born, in the imperfect system of the culture that predominates in that culture, in the very imperfect system of our legal system, why would you bother to get a dog when, this breed has leg problems when they're older, this breed isn't very intelligent? Why would you get a dog? Or make this video? It's just so crude compared to the beauty of the imagination. To try and capture that beauty in something so minuscule as language and a bit of chalk. These imperfect hands too, dented thumbnails. It's like, why? And yet, when we come out of this unconscious totality, this unconscious probability, and get a fixer-upper, get a house. It's square and there's mildew over here and not enough light over there and the neighbors are... Why would you even get a house? And yet, as soon as we embody and own our little piece of imperfection, the growth process is of taking human consciousness slowly back into relationship with the complexity of the whole, which is a paradoxical complexity. Because as soon as we do take ownership of our little religion, of our little thought dogma, now there's all these things that don't quite fit in it. What about those good Muslims that are more kind than your crappy Christian neighbors, or the good materialists who are so much more useful when it comes to putting up shelves or something than, the esoterics sitting around in their hermitages. And so even if you adopt the hermitage path, like, okay, I will be a hermit, that's a system. I will sit in silence, that's a system. Because you're already approaching that system through language. I will sit in silence. And there's meanings about that are part of the system of the cult in which the language and the perspective and paradigms of hermitaging is presented. And I'm going to reject this part of the system so that I can honor this part of the system. Even that is within the system. And yet, there's that line in the poem, to return to the place where we began, having gone on a long journey, and this time to know it for the first time, to perhaps experience the bliss of perfect love as we make love beautifully for one of the first times in our lives. And then they're going on and on about dentistry and toothpaste, and it's like, I want nothing to do with that. Let's go and find another perfect love that doesn't have any of these imperfections. And yet to ultimately, after trying to find the perfect person for however many decades, and never having created the perfect relationship, by entering deeply into a system and then slowly opening it, slowly refining that system, infusing it with consciousness, with distinction, with partnering, with synergy, such that more is created in the synergy of two people than could be created alone, and in which significantly more development occurs from working within the system. I'm going to go to the gym every morning. Well, why do that? Why ruin a good morning by going to the gym? And yet, it's a system that if we enter it, going into a gym for the first time, crazy people sitting around, moving their bodies in weird ways, doing nothing. What's the point? And yet 3 years later, if we will go through that system, if we will enter a martial art, if we will enter a dance movement, if we will form a career, after 1,000 hours or more of patient work, mastering the system, understanding the point where it has an edge, getting to know ourselves as we're at the edge of our body's ability. And where is that limit? There used to be a concrete 4-minute mile. No one could break through it. And yet, now, hundreds of people have broken through it. It's no longer an impossibility, but maybe the 3-minute and 40-second mile is an impossibility right now. But will there not be someone that does it in 3 minutes and 39 seconds? Of course. So you have this constant thing of being at the edge of a system, and getting to know the liminal, getting to understand and experience flow within a system, complete immersion and absorption in a system. And I want to get married. Getting to know the depth and the nuance of what a marriage with this person can unlock. And as we shift our relationship with a given object, I want what I want. And we start with that relationship, and we take that as far as it can go. And one day it occurs to us, fuck what I want? How can I be of service? How can I serve this person and help them be at their best? And have that be a part of the meaning of my life. Now there's a completely different relationship. And then, now that we're being of service, maybe we start off by giving, that's our paradigm. I'm going to be of service. I'm going to give this person food. I'm going to give them money. I'm going to give them, and then it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm creating a completely dependent person. Oh, I'm going to be of service by taking. I'm going to be of service by challenging them. And it's like, well, what's the difference between that and just getting? It's like it's a different paradigm. It's a different perspective as we work through the fixed point of any person or any object or any system. And we can work slowly around that system, where first of all it's the ideal. Then it's the opposite. Then it's terrible. We want nothing to do with it. Then it's got some good points and some bad points. So we will have something to do with it. Then we'll be of service to it. Then we'll take as much as we can as a way of being of service to it. Then we'll just take as much as we can for me. And then who is me, if not the interconnected whole of which we are a part? And so there's this continual breathing process. And one of the scientific shapes that emerges as one of the most powerful shapes is the torus. Within the framework of a torus, we look at every object from every possible angle in a constant process of here is where I stand. This is what I see from here. You're selfish and you need to change. That's where I stand now. And develop a relationship with that. And now I'm selfish for focusing on your selfishness. And the relationship pivots. I'm completely right. I'm completely wrong. Now I'm completely wrong on what I was thinking was right and wrong. So now that changes. And we just keep moving. And integration and integrity it's not about the fact that all of these positions in the probability field don't exist. And it's not that all of these positions in the probability field don't have validity. That if you're standing right here, you see the point over here with complete validity from this perspective. And so it's not about where you stand within the probability field or within this infinite shape as being right or wrong, as much that we have to take a position while knowing that the position is in flux. While knowing that the fact that we were really clear that giving up all of our possessions and traveling the world was the thing to do, is and was the thing to do for the time that we did it. Just like we're really clear that money is not about, it's just not what it's about. It's not about money. Money gets in the way. It's like, what really matters to you? And then you find what really matters to you. And then you discover that there's a cost for it. And so if you really want to do what matters to you, then you have to have the money. to provide the food, etc., such that you can go and do that thing. So then it flips back. It's like, so money is so unimportant because you've got to do what really matters to you. And now what really matters to you costs money. So now money is important for a new reason. Now it's important because it facilitates what really matters to you. So we enter the domain of paradox, where what's really important to me is to be selfless. I don't like selfish people. So I need to be selfless. And so then the question is, well, what's the most selfless thing that you can do? Well, then it comes right back to self. Well, the most selfless thing that I could do is to totally develop myself and then give that to others. Well, then what is that? Well, I can't give money if I haven't earned money and created money. I can't give cooking unless I've focused on learning to cook. So I can't be selfless without being selfish. I can't be selfish if I hate selfishness. So then, how do I deal with the fact that I hate being selfish? So I've got to be selfish so that I can be selfless. And the question is, what are the things that are useful in this continual spiral through reality? What is it that transcends the given point here? And one thing is honesty. You can say that, well, we're all on this journey of going through life. And if we're going through life, the essence of life is the in-breath and the out-breath. The essence of life is transformation. To go from one form to another form. In what way? Well, mentally, emotionally, and physically. To get fed up with your country and move abroad. And it's perfect until you realize that it's not, that there are other things back home that are really neat that you took for granted until you left. And then you find it's kind of nice buying with one click. It's kind of nice having traffic-free roads. But, what's more important? What about human beings and human relationship? And then you start realizing, depends at the point that we're at. And so, what matters as all of us are going through these different stages, focusing on the inner so that we can focus on the outer? It's like, I want to be my best. I want to be really efficient and make lots of money. It's all out there. Okay, well, before you can do that, you have to get to know you in here. You have to get to know what things could I do really well that would be really useful so that lots of people would want to pay me all that money. You have to figure out and know yourself so much that you know what would be that great talent that you would do on the outside that would be so valuable, which means you've got to focus on the inside. If you really want to exhale, you've got to really inhale. So we're in this domain of paradox. And life is about flow. But life is also about death. Because in order to change this, to get rid of this, I'm no longer I'm cut off the long hair and the peace talking and all that. I'm in the corporate world. But in order to make that transition, I'm now letting something go. I'm dying. In order to give birth, there's a death. So am I really pursuing life or am I pursuing death? And maybe at one point it's the new life. And then at the next point it's the death. And noticing what's dying. And then I want to be positive. I want to be really positive and see, the best, see the silver lining. But then at some point it's myopic to only see white against white against white against white. So if I want depth perception, I've got to see the negative to contrast with the positive. Because if I'm being totally positive, you're wonderful, you're wonderful, you're wonderful. Well, who do you hire to build your house if everyone's wonderful because you're being so positive? Well, you're more positive because you get your jobs done on time. And you're more positive than that because you get them done on time and on budget. And that's more positive because then I'm not staying in a hotel arguing with my partner about why the house isn't finished. So it's more positive to be negative and compare so that we can transcend comparing. In other words, I want to be sitting around in my nice house, being open to everything. But if I'm in a motel waiting for the nice house and struggling around money, I'm not sitting around being thrilled with everything. So then I have to really manage the details so that I can create this beautiful environment from which to sit around and be expansive after being incredibly anal. In other words, if I want to really appreciate this white here, this particular bit of white, I can't contrast it with this white. I can't say this white is so nice compared to this white. It's white. But I can say this white is so nice in reference to what? To black. It's so nice to be white, but I need the black there to reference. I really like this part of myself, not so much this part. And then it changes, of course, like, I do like the fact that I'm a hard ass some of the time. Because that got me the space in order to be so nice. And so it's this constant flow. And so in this sense, if we're growing, if we're living, and you have evil and live spelled backwards and forwards, to live, spelling it forward, evil to go backwards. That what we're trying to do is stay present to where we are. And in this sense, the biggest crime is to be wishing that we were over here when we're here. We wish we were positive about the fact that there's been another tax scandal. And so we're spending all of our money arguing with the IRS. We wish that we were over here in grace and miracles, but we're not. We're here. So in that sense, one of the biggest crimes is to pretend that we're in a location that we're not. You're going to your positive group and everyone's being so positive and everything's wonderful, but you're actually over here in envy and self-pity, relating to the fact that this bit isn't working. And maybe one of the reasons it's not working is that the obsession with being positive is preventing the balance that comes from embracing positivity and negativity. That is not okay, this is okay. Well, that's a paradox. That is a symmetry between the not has equal value to the yes. And of course, you can't say yes to having your body here unless you've said no to having the body be everywhere else but here. They're interlinked. And so many of these things are two sides of the same coin. One supporting the other, the black supporting the white, the negativity supporting the positivity. The I can't stand that and I want to get away from it, combining with I love that and I want to get close to it. Being part of the same process of momentum to get away from and to get towards, so that we can look back, perhaps, and see what we did not see at the time. And what we're really dealing with is the human ego, which in the totality of the probability field, we are all of it. But as an ego, the ego is the bit that is at a certain millisecond in the film, the laser beam, the zoom-in lens. The whole movie is there. The whole lifetime is there. But if you're watching a movie, you're not seeing 10,000 images all blurring in top of each other. What you're doing is you're seeing one image at one moment moving to the next image, moving to the next image. And so perhaps the worst crime is to be viewing this image, but pretending that we're viewing this image. Hi, how are you? I'd like to get to know you. Oh, I'm this really positive person, and I don't like thinking negatively about anyone. And I'm seething with the fact that that's probably not good enough, and I'm filled with envy and bitterness about that. I'm annoyed that I have to pretend to be something different than I am, and that's where I am, as opposed to where I'd like to be or how I'd like to present. Because truly, if life is a journey, and much of the richness of that journey comes in sharing the ride, in sharing the path. Sharing the path is impossible if I say I'm here, but I'm actually here. Because if you show up to meet me for a date here where I'm not, and I'm actually over here, we're not actually meeting. You're meeting my performance, my image. You're not meeting me where I am. And so you have that dynamic, but even that, fake it till you make it. Isn't there something in that too? To aspire to be someplace and to act as if, and then grow it into that. Doesn't that also sometimes work? And so we're back where we began. And there's the matter of capacity, stimulation capacity and digestive capacity. Because what this is in a certain way is a proposition for engaging with reality where we are, in recognizing the opportunity to be in very small, limited systems as a way to get to know the transcendent part in each of us that is outside of the system. Because while there's a part of me that's in this system right now, there's also an awareness of the part of me that is outside of this whole paradigm. Because the one who witnesses the system is not in the system. The witness, by definition, is bigger than what is being witnessed. In set theory, you cannot understand a set until you are outside the set. So the very fact of being able to articulate this set of sets means that there's a part of you and I that's outside of this paradigm of set, engaging with reality. But you can't get to know what part is outside of it until you've defined what is by definition a limiting set of sets. This is a paradigm for understanding paradigms. And in that sense, it can include every culture in human history, the entire possibility field of the species. And yet, who's the part looking at that? Who's therefore not part of this? And what is that? To come to that moment of awareness, one must invest fully in this. This is my paradigm. If it's not my paradigm, what am I doing talking about it? I have to take a position. Having taken the position, I'm now in a position to notice that which is outside of the position. That is still me. And so the path is always one of contraction and expansion simultaneously. You don't get to meet the one who is outside the paradigm unless you fully define the paradigm. You don't get to fully define the paradigm without making it personal and putting a part of ourselves into the paradigm. As I listen to different people operating within a wide range of paradigms, one of the things that I value the most is the integration with the paradigm. The integration of heart, mind, and body. So going back to angels in my hair, I see a woman living her paradigm, viscerally talking with the angels that she viscerally sees and viscerally relates to mentally, emotionally, and physically, and in time, and in a cosmology that is not my cosmology. But she's there in it. And in that sense is far more real, is moving through a process of change by both being in it and being able to be aware by describing and writing a book. As soon as you write a book, you're getting to know the observer who is outside the part of you that is living what is being observed. So by the time you can thoroughly and completely describe where you are in heart, mind, and body, in past, present, and future, you are by definition outside of what you just defined. But you don't get to that point of transcendence without thoroughly defining, becoming conscious of the box that you're in. Happy hunting. This is a lot of fun, isn't it?